I was replaced by the CEO's niece just 24 hours before my retirement party. I had given this company 20 years of my life, built its backbone, and secured a $100 million deal. And overnight, everything crumbled. Before we dive into the story, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I'm always curious to see how far these stories reach. Now let's get into it. My name is Evelyn Carter. Most people just call me Evie. For 2 decades I devoted everything I had to Westridge Dynamics, a powerful mid-sized tech manufacturing company that demanded long nights, endless travel, and sacrifices I never thought I'd make. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, and even family funerals because Gerald Huxley, the CEO, told me the company couldn't run without me. And he wasn't wrong. I had worked my way from a small assistant desk to becoming the woman who made the company's most important deals happen. For years Gerald promised that when my time came, the company would celebrate me. A retirement party, a generous bonus, and a symbolic handshake to honor the legacy I was leaving behind. That was what kept me going when exhaustion made me want to quit. The idea that my name would be remembered in the halls of Westridge, not just as an employee, but as the person who helped shape its foundation. But promises are cheap when greed and nepotism enter the room. Just one day before my retirement party, Gerald called me into his sleek glass office. I thought it was to go over last-minute details or maybe to thank me personally. Instead, he leaned back in his leather chair and said words that knocked the breath out of me. "Evie, we've decided to go in a different direction. My niece Madison will be stepping into your role immediately." Madison, Maddie as she insisted people call her, was 26 years old, fresh out of some vague marketing job, with no background in our industry and no understanding of the work I'd spent years building. She waltzed into the office wearing designer shoes and a smug grin, as if she had actually earned the ground she was standing on. I was left staring at Gerald, waiting for him to laugh, to tell me it was some kind of joke. But there was no laughter, only a cold final decision. 20 years of loyalty, erased in a single conversation. No party, no recognition, no handshake, just betrayal. And in that moment, I realized everything I had built was about to be handed to someone who didn't even know what it meant to work for it. The announcement spread faster than wildfire, and within hours the entire office knew. I walked through the hallways expecting at least one familiar face to speak up, to question the decision, but all I saw were lowered eyes and hushed conversations. My co-workers, people I had mentored, trained, and even covered for over the years, suddenly acted as if I were invisible. Fear had gripped them. Nobody wanted to be the one to challenge Gerald's authority. Gerald made a point of addressing the staff himself, standing tall in the atrium with Maddie at his side. He dressed it up as progress, as if tossing me aside was an act of vision. "We need fresh young blood," he declared, his voice booming with rehearsed confidence. "The future of Westridge lies with the next generation." The words cut deeper than any insult. I wasn't just being pushed out, I was being painted as obsolete, a relic of the past. Maddie basked in the spotlight, shaking hands and smiling like she had climbed a mountain rather than been handed the peak. She strutted through the office with a sense of entitlement so thick it filled every corner. I watched her slip into meetings she hadn't earned, sit at the head of tables she hadn't built, and beam as if she deserved the applause. The worst part, people clapped, not because they believed in her, but because Gerald demanded it. The retirement send-off I had been promised quietly vanished. No speeches, no gathering, no token of appreciation for the years I had sacrificed. The calendar invite I had once seen pinned to the breakroom board disappeared overnight, replaced by a memo celebrating new leadership. I stood at my desk, staring at the empty space where balloons and thank you notes should have been, and felt my throat tighten. Inside, fury simmered, hot and unrelenting. I smiled faintly when co-workers passed, masking the storm that was building beneath the surface. They thought I would walk away quietly, bowing my head in silence. But humiliation has a way of igniting something dangerous. I swallowed the rage, buried it deep where no one could see, and told myself one thing. If they believed I was finished, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. For 3 relentless years, I had poured myself into one project that could change the future of Westridge. The $100 million contract with HarborTech Industries wasn't just numbers on paper. It was the result of countless flights, late-night calls across time zones, and endless negotiations where I had to earn respect word by word. Clint Mercer, HarborTech's sharp but fair leader, didn't give his trust easily. Every clause we agreed upon, every concession we secured, was the product of patience and credibility I had built with him. I knew that contract inside and out. The financial models, the supply logistics, the risk assessments, those details were engraved into my mind like scripture. It was my crowning achievement, the proof that my years of dedication hadn't been for nothing. But in Gerald's eyes, it was nothing more than a trophy he could hand to his niece. When the moment finally came, I wasn't even invited into the room. Instead, Maddie was ushered into the spotlight, dressed as though she were attending a gala rather than a business negotiation. Gerald introduced her to Clint as though she had shepherded the entire deal from conception to completion. "This is the future of Westridge," he proclaimed with pride, handing her the pen I had been waiting years to hold. I stood just outside the glass wall of the conference room, invisible to the very people who knew better. Watching Maddie scribble her signature on the final documents was like watching a thief take credit for a lifetime's work. She didn't even understand the stakes, couldn't recite a single clause if pressed, and yet she smiled like she had conquered the impossible. The deal was sealed, but not by the person who had bled for it. My chest ached with a mixture of anger and sorrow I couldn't describe. It wasn't just about recognition. It was about the principle. I had earned that moment, and it was stolen in plain sight. I left the building without a word, carrying the weight of betrayal like a stone in my stomach. To everyone else, the contract was a victory. To me, it was the sharpest reminder that loyalty meant nothing when nepotism ruled the throne. The first cracks showed almost immediately. Maddie walked into her initial meeting with HarborTech as though she owned the room, ignoring the fact that Clint Mercer was a man who valued respect above all else. Instead of listening, she filled the air with empty confidence, speaking over him, dismissing his concerns, and name-dropping her connection to Gerald as if that were enough to carry her. Clint's expression hardened with each passing minute. He had spent years dealing with me, building a professional trust that couldn't be faked. Now, in front of him sat someone who acted as though the contract was nothing more than a formality. Maddie even joked that being part of the family meant she didn't need to worry about the finer details. To her it was charming. To Clint it was arrogance. The meeting that should have been a formality to strengthen the partnership ended with him leaving the table earlier than planned. His parting words were clipped, polite on the surface, but the unease was unmistakable. HarborTech didn't pull out immediately, but the hesitation was clear. A deal I had carefully nurtured for years now trembled on a thread. Inside Westridge, the whispers began. Employees who had once clapped on command started murmuring about the disaster unfolding. Numbers on the projections board no longer looked stable, and confidence in Maddie's ability to lead grew thinner by the hour. People were too frightened to say it aloud, but the truth was circulating. Gerald's golden choice might ruin everything. For the first time in years, the company that once looked untouchable appeared fragile. The mighty $100 million contract, the one meant to cement Westridge's future, was no longer a symbol of triumph. It had become a ticking time bomb, and everyone could feel it counting down. I tried to convince myself it was over, that walking away meant closing the door for good. But the world has a way of keeping you tied to the places that broke you. Calls trickled in from former co-workers, hushed voices carrying stories of mounting chaos inside Westridge. Meetings were unraveling, clients were second-guessing their commitments, and confidence in the leadership was slipping through their fingers. Each update felt like a bitter echo of the betrayal I'd endured. Part of me felt vindicated hearing the cracks widen. They had discarded me like yesterday's news, and now they were choking on the very decision they celebrated. But another part of me burned with fury, because even as everything I had built began to collapse, my name wasn't mentioned. No one was pointing out that I had held the foundation steady all those years. Instead, silence covered the truth. The temptation to step in gnawed at me. I could have called Clint, reminded him of the trust we once shared, maybe even salvaged what was left. But I didn't. I refused to give Gerald or his niece the satisfaction of thinking I still carried their burdens. If they wanted to play with fire, they could burn on their own. Nights were the hardest. I would lie awake, Gerald's smug words replaying in my mind. His cold dismissal. His declaration that my time was over. The sting of humiliation twisted into something sharper, more focused. The pain I once carried like a wound began to harden into resolve. They thought they had written me off, but they hadn't seen what I was capable of without their chains holding me down. I stayed silent but not passive. Every whisper of their downfall fed a quiet strength inside me. Maddie was floundering, Gerald was scrambling, and the empire they had built on my back was starting to sink. For the first time, I realized my revenge didn't have to come from striking back. Sometimes, the sweetest justice is found in simply watching the guilty unravel all on their own. The news broke early on a Monday morning, and by noon it had spread across every corner of the company. HarborTech walked away, their carefully worded statement cutting like a blade. A lack of professionalism. The phrase was repeated in emails, on investor calls, and in headlines that painted Westridge as unstable. A deal once hailed as the crown jewel of the company was gone, dissolved in a single decision. The financial hit was brutal. Markets reacted within hours, shares plummeting as analysts downgraded their outlook. Departments scrambled to slash expenses, and whispers of downsizing turned into official notices. People who had dedicated years were suddenly packing boxes, their livelihoods shattered because of one catastrophic failure at the top. Inside the boardroom, Gerald's composure cracked. He pointed fingers in every direction, shifting responsibility onto managers, onto changing conditions, onto anything but the truth staring him in the face. Maddie, pale but defiant, repeated the same excuse over and over. She only needed a little more time. Her voice trembled, but her arrogance kept her from admitting the damage she had caused. The building that once thrived on ambition now reeked of desperation. Morale collapsed as fast as the stock price, with meetings filled not with innovation but with fear. The spiral had begun, and no one seemed capable of stopping it. What was once a powerful name in the industry was unraveling piece by piece, and the very people who had cast me aside were now trapped in the storm of their own making. The message came unexpectedly, a short note from Clint Mercer himself. His words were direct, without any trace of corporate polish. He made it clear he had never believed Maddie was the one behind the deal. He knew who had put in the work, who had earned his respect, and who had actually built the foundation of trust between the two companies. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Instead, he laid out an offer that left me momentarily speechless. HarborTech wanted me, not Westridge, not Gerald, not Maddie. Me. A consulting role with full authority to guide their next moves, complete with a contract generous enough to wipe away any doubts about my future. I sat with the proposal in my hands, feeling the weight of what it represented. This wasn't just employment, it was validation. It was proof that my years of dedication hadn't been erased by one man's nepotism. Someone saw my value clearly, and that someone happened to run the very company Gerald had just lost. Accepting the role wasn't difficult. I signed without hesitation, a calm satisfaction settling over me. It wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. I wasn't plotting to destroy Westridge myself. The beauty was that by moving forward, by stepping into this new chapter, I would prove something far greater, that I was indispensable, no matter how hard Gerald had tried to convince me otherwise. Walking away this time felt different. I wasn't leaving in humiliation or defeat. I was walking toward a future that recognized my worth, leaving Westridge to drown in the mess it had created. My revenge was quiet, but it was absolute. It didn't take long for the board to piece together the truth. Numbers on quarterly reports told a story too ugly to ignore. The collapse of the HarborTech deal had triggered losses in the hundreds of millions. Questions about oversight turned into accusations, and Gerald could no longer hide behind polished speeches. His decision to hand authority to his niece was dragged into the spotlight, dissected by executives who had once blindly followed him. Maddie's facade cracked under pressure. In meetings, her lack of knowledge became impossible to mask. She stumbled through presentations, avoided direct questions, and grew defensive when challenged. What had been whispered behind closed doors was now undeniable. She had been elevated not for talent but for bloodline. The same arrogance she once flaunted now painted her as a liability. Industry circles took notice. Competitors mocked the fiasco, investors demanded accountability, and Gerald's reputation, once built on power and strategy, was shredded. Invitations to elite conferences stopped arriving, and the proud Huxley name became shorthand for failure. Maddie, once paraded as the symbol of the future, became a cautionary tale. I kept my distance, silent to the public eye. There were no gloating remarks, no dramatic confrontations. But behind closed doors, I allowed myself a quiet smile. The empire that had discarded me was caving in on itself, piece by piece, and I hadn't lifted a finger. The justice I craved was unfolding without my intervention, and it was sweeter than anything I could have planned. At Harbor Tech, I found myself stepping into rooms where my voice carried weight, not because of who I was connected to, but because of what I had proven. My strategies tightened operations, closed gaps others had missed, and within months the company saw savings that ran into the millions. Every success reinforced what I had always known, that my worth was undeniable, no matter how Gerald had tried to erase it. Colleagues treated me with genuine respect, not out of fear or obligation, but out of recognition for the results I delivered. I forged alliances with leaders who valued competence over politics, people who saw me not as replaceable, but as essential. For the first time in years, I worked without the shadow of someone waiting to take credit for what I accomplished. As Harbor Tech flourished, news of Westridge's decline reached me like echoes from another world. Headlines painted a picture of a company unraveling, its failures standing in stark contrast to our rising success. I didn't need to say a word. The comparison spoke for itself. The very deal Gerald and Maddie had stolen became the symbol of their undoing, and the foundation of my ascent. I never plotted revenge in the traditional sense, yet the outcome couldn't have been more poetic. Their downfall paralleled my rise. Each step forward I took casting their failures into sharper relief. What they thought was the end of me had become the beginning of something far greater. And this time I was not just surviving, I was thriving. I look back now at that day, when I was cast aside with nothing but a hollow dismissal, and realize it wasn't an ending at all. Being pushed out only forced me to see the path I should have taken long before. I had believed my story would close quietly with a retirement party, a handshake, and a plaque on a wall. Instead, I found something far greater. The contract Gerald stole from me didn't vanish from my life. It simply returned to where it belonged. The collapse of Westridge was never my burden to carry. Their loss became the very reason my future opened wider than I had ever imagined. What I gained was more than professional success. I reclaimed my dignity, my independence, and a freedom I never knew I had been missing. The chains of loyalty to a company that never valued me are gone. I rose higher not because I sought revenge, but because I chose myself. And in the end, that was the one thing Gerald could never take away. Do you think I was right to walk away from Westridge and start fresh, or should I have given them another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories.